boys and girls. Miss Williams here, and I am going to share one of my favorite books with you. It's called A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. I thought it was a good book because a lot of people are talking about possibly being sick, and that's why we're not going to school right now, so we can stay at home with our families and wash our hands real good and all stay healthy. So let's see if this book by David Shannon can help us figure out how to stay healthy. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror, and then she screamed. No wonder why she screamed. That dress looks awful pretty. Her mother ran into the room. She screamed too. "Oh my heavens!" she cried. "You're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from her head to her toes. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered, "but just look at me." "You get back in bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say. And she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. "Most extraordinary," he exclaimed. "I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camilla told her. "I feel fine." "Well then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, "I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crown, Knight of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue. And she broke out in stars. Boys and girls, I also don't think that the children were being very nice to Camilla. The other kids thought it was great. One yelled, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard!" and the pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon, everyone was calling out different shapes, colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV. Looks like all the other boys and girls are laughing and having a good time. Are they being nice friends? No, they're not. They're making red choices. I hope that all of my preschool friends would make green choices and want to be Camilla's friend during this time. That night, Mr. Harms, the principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction. And I've been getting calls from other parents. They're afraid those stripes might be contagious." Boys and girls, do you know what it means for something to be contagious? It means that you and I can catch it. For example, if I cough or sneeze on someone, they could catch some kind of virus that I have. Well, they're thinking that you can catch these Stripes. Have you ever known anyone to have a bad case of stripes? I haven't either. Boys and girls, do you think this book is real? That means nonfiction. Or is it fake? Is it a fiction book? I think it's fiction also. I love this book, but I don't think anyone has had a bad case of stripes. Let's see what happens next. Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago, everyone liked her. Now, nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart? He asked. No, thank you, sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. How do you think Camilla's feeling right now, friends? Do you think she's feeling happy that she has all these colors? Or is she feeling sad because other friends aren't being nice to her? I think you're right. I think Camilla is feeling sad. Well, let's see. Yes, I see, Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. I think I'd better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over. About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. This is Dr. Grop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young. When the specialist went to work on Camilla, they squeezed and jabbed and tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. Well, it's not the mumps, concluded Dr. Grop. Or the measles, said Dr. Sponge. Definitely not the chicken pox, put Dr. Cricket. Or a sunburn, said Dr. Young. Try these, said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. Take one of each before bed, said Dr. Grop. And they filed out the door, followed by Dr. Bumble. Boys and girls, this is back when doctors used to make what they call house calls, where instead of you going to the doctor's office, the doctors would come to your home. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with her face on it. Oh my goodness, boys and girls. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called. But this time, instead of the specialist, he brought the experts. Dr. Gourd and Mr. Mellon were the 2 scientific minds in the land, the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gourd finally spoke. It might be a virus, he announced with authority. Suddenly, Fuzz little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. Or possibly some kind of bacteria, said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or it could be a fungus, added Dr. Gourd. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camilla and then at each other. We need to go over these numbers again back at the lab, Dr. Gourd explained. We'll call you when we know something. But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. Oh my goodness. I bet right now Camilla's wishing she still had the stripes because it's getting crazier and crazier. By now, the TV news had found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house, telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. The Creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies, from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. "Close your eyes," she said. "Breathe deeply and become one with your room." "I wish you hadn't said that," Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth. Her nose was the dresser. 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran out of the house. "What are we going to do?" cried Mrs. Cream. "It just keeps getting worse and worse," and she began to sob. Oh, poor Camilla. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock on the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. "Excuse me," she said brightly, "but I think I can help." Let's see what she has. She went into Camilla's room and looked around. "My goodness," she said with a shake of her head. "What we have here is a bad case of stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen." She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. "Here," she said, "these might do the trick." "Are those magic beans?" asked Mrs. Cream. "Oh my, no," replied the kind old woman. "There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I bet you like some, wouldn't you?" she asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big, heaping plateful of lima beans more than just about anything, but she was afraid to admit it. "Yuck," she said. "No one likes lima beans, especially me." "Oh dear," the old woman said sadly. "I guess I was wrong about you." She put the beans back in her bag and started towards the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been through. She finally couldn't stand it. "Wait!" she cried. "The truth is, I really love lima beans." "I thought so," the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. "Mmm," said Camilla. What do you think? Are the beans going to do the magic trick, friends? She said they're not magic beans. Suddenly, the branches, the feathers, the squiggly tails began to disappear. The whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. "I'm cured!" she shouted. "Yes," said the old woman. "I knew the real you was in there somewhere." She patted Camilla on the head, and she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Boys and girls, if those weren't magic beans, how did that fix her? Let's see, maybe the last page will tell us. Afterwards, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had even a touch of the stripes again. Boys and girls, the moral to the story, or the lesson of this story, is to be who you are. Don't be worried about what other friends think. So it wasn't the lima beans that cured her. It's that she was finally felt brave enough to tell her friends and all the other people what she liked and not worry about what they thought of her. Now, we said that this book was a fiction book. It's a make-believe book. But what's real, what's nonfiction, is that you always need to be brave enough to be who you are and who your family loves, which is you. Boys and girls, who was the main character in this book? The main character is who the book was all about. Here's a hint. What was her name? Camilla. Camilla Cream was her name. You're right. Boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed the bad case of the stripes, and I hope you remember to always be brave enough to be strong and be who you are. Have a great night. Bye.